Hi, VencoreWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Friday, January 19th. Well, it's been quite a cold month of January so far across the eastern two-thirds of the nation. This particular map shows the temperature anomalies from January 1st to today, and again, well below normal temperatures from around the Rocky Mountains to the East Coast during this part of the month of January. Colder pattern really began a couple of days before Christmas in the northern plains. That colder pattern reached the East Coast by around Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or so, and we've been pretty well below normal each and every day in that time period over the last 3 or 4 weeks. But it looks like a warmer stretch of weather will begin this weekend. Looks likely that it'll continue right around into the first week of February. After that, we could have an extended period of colder weather again for the bulk of February going into March. And we'll kind of go into some of the reasons why over the next few minutes. This particular map, again, shows a temperature anomaly pattern well below normal from around the Rocky Mountains all the way to the East Coast and all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. This map from Weather Bell Analytics for the month of January so far. Well, we often talk about teleconnections here at VencoreWeather.com, and meteorologists use all kinds of indices during the winter time to kind of get a look at what may happen over the medium term, the longer term, such indices as the North Atlantic Oscillation, NAO, or the Arctic Oscillation. Another index is called the Madden-Julian Oscillation, MJO, and this actually represents a tropical disturbance that typically will propagate around the world. This is a forecast map by the European model for the MJO from today going into the early part of February. Today is actually indicated by this particular arrow, and then the green in a counterclockwise fashion represents where the European model expects the MJO index to propagate over the next few weeks. This particular point is February 1st, and again, this is moving in this fashion, and research has shown that depending on the particular phase of the MJO, it typically will correlate with certain temperature and precipitation anomaly patterns around the world. The phase on this particular forecast map represented by these numbers right here, 4, 5, and 6. So in other words, the MJO is forecasted to go through phase 4, through phase 5, and into phase 6 over the next 3 weeks or so, from today right into the early part of February. And research studies have again shown that you can expect certain types of temperature anomalies given these phases, and we'll take a look at that now to see why that indicates warmer weather here in the central and eastern U.S. for the next 2 to 3 weeks. And these are temperature composite maps based on the particular phase of the MJO index for this time of the year. This is basically the December, January, and February time frame here. Phase 4 indicates warmer than normal temperatures for the most part from the central U.S. all the way to the East Coast. We have now just entered into phase 4 on that particular MJO index forecast map, and it looks like we will head into phase 5, and then finally phase 6 by the early part of February, and it continues to propagate at that point into phase 7. And now let's take a look at what those typically correlate to in terms of temperature anomalies. And here we go. Take a look. Pretty clear signal here that when the MJO this time of the year goes into phase 5, 6, or even 7, typically results in colder weather out west, but warmer weather in the central and eastern U.S. Again, this is supportive of the idea that we have a 2 to 3 week stretch here of above normal conditions. Now, let me give a note of caution here. That does not mean there will not be cold air outbreaks. There will be, in fact, but they would tend to be relatively short-lived compared to what we just have seen over the past few weeks, and probably just moderately cold, not the bitter cold that we experienced during the early part of January. And it doesn't mean that each and every day going forward into early February will be above normal, but probably if you take 5-day periods and get the average temperature anomaly there, it'll be above normal going into the first week of February. Once we get through this MJO is very likely to continue to propagate into phase 8 and then wrap around again into phase 1 and 2. And those 3 phases are actually colder than normal for the central and eastern U.S. Again, supportive of the idea that once we get through this next 2 or 3 weeks of above normal conditions, we'll probably get back to a colder period for the bulk of February, and likely that'll last into March. In fact, comparison with some analog years where there are La Nina conditions in the tropical Pacific, which we have right now, and those years where we had an active tropical season in the Atlantic Basin, typically turns colder in February, and that cold pattern, once it sets up in February, often sticks around in those analog years well into the month of March. So again, it looks like a warmer stretch here for the central and eastern U.S. for the next 2 or 3 weeks, much different than the last 3 or 4 weeks, but winter is not over. A colder period, and perhaps an extended colder period, will probably get established again by the latter part of the first week or the second week of February, continue through the bulk of February into March. So winter is not over yet. That's it for now. For VencoreWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.